Batter up, institutional investors could soon own your favorite MLB team. So let's read a little bit here from the article. Ownership of professional sports franchises has always been reserved for the richest of the rich, the top 1%ers who have had hundreds of millions in available cash needed to score a majority stake in an MLB or NBA team. However, there's now growing movement to help non-billionaires buy into a league. Earlier this week, Bloomberg reported that MLB has formally opted to allow investment funds backed by Wall Street firms and college endowments to purchase minority stake in multiple teams. The move is reportedly meant to help minority team owners offset skyrocketing club valuations that have made it hard to find potential buyers in the event they want to sell their stakes. So I'm going to go read one last little interesting part here because it just kind of talks about the values of different teams. I thought this was really interesting, and then I want to hear you guys' thoughts. Though no investment vehicle has officially begun taking stakes in any clubs, it would in theory serve as a sort of fund of funds with a secondary market eventually emerging that could allow investors to make equity trades that increase team valuations or earn a payout in the rare case when the majority owner sells. This part right here is what caught my eye. Such structure could be especially appealing for investors given that the valuation of pro sports typically has no correlation to the stock market in the event of a recession. So that's a really huge change coming up, don't you guys think? What do you guys think about? You guys were talking about this right as we were about to get started here. So any opinion on how this could play out? Chelsea?
My husband is a really big baseball fan, and so I was asking his opinion. I brought him kind of into the fold with this one, and he thinks that it could be a good kind of change because that way it would show more light, I guess, to baseball. But I guess I'm really confused on how you actually value the team. Because you can't necessarily value the team based on the players. You'd have to value the team on, like, if they had a fund of funds is what they talked about. How do you value what that fund is worth? You know, is it based on the earnings that a specific team brings in? Is it based on the earnings that a group of teams brings in? It's definitely interesting. I guess in the sense of the stock market, it could be a hedge. Mm-hmm. If things, since it's not directly correlated, but at the same time it is correlated because it is a company, so it's based on its earnings. So I don't know. It's just really confusing.
One thing to keep in mind. One thing to keep in mind of how you value would be like the Yankees. You go around the world and you see people around the world who wear New York Yankees gear.
Right.
But you don't see them wearing Kansas City Royals gear.
True.
So the name brand is also part of that value, I think.
True.
But the valuation generally comes from the revenue stream.
Right. Correct.
There's many times when you hear that you really don't have to have a fan in the stands and they're still going to make money.
Right.
The question would be, with an investment like that, do they get more input on what the team's going to be doing? Because the more money's involved, the more a team's going to have to could get more of the direction that the team's going, not necessarily from a player's standpoint, but where they're getting their revenue. Do they bring on more pay-per-view or something to increase the revenue of that particular team so that minority investors can have more input on that?
I think going back to kind of like the Royals, what you were saying, I mean, do we think that if the Royals were to spend more on players and actually compete for those better players and obtain better players, would they have a bigger franchise? Would they be more known? Would they be more valued if they put more money into their players?
I guess it depends on the strategy.
Right. And so
we didn't have any really big name players when we won the World Series.
Well, I mean, you had like Moustakas. He was really good back then. And so he's been traded since then. But another thing that they talked about in that article was how the Boston Red Sox, they won the World Series last year, and they ended up paying a fine, an extra tax, because the amount of payroll that they had went over a certain threshold. And
that's a luxury tax that they have with baseball.
It's a competitive balance tax.
The concern that you would have with having something like this is that the more money that gets into baseball, the fewer average fans could then afford to go.
I don't know. I guess finishing what my thought was on that was that, does it make more sense to spend more money on players that are people are going to want to come and see and potentially win the World Series? Because if they would not have paid the players that they had, they based that on that they would not have won the World Series. And the whole idea to get more accreditation, to get more valuation for your team, is to win the World Series, to make it to playoffs.
Rep, what I was saying about the Royals is that wouldn't be the only strategy, because the Royals had no really big name players, but we made it to the World Series. They're like, the movie Moneyball.
Yeah.
That was made off of a bunch of no name players. They traded off their biggest players for, but maybe you'll see small stake minority owners having more say in how a team is managed.
That's true.
Or maybe they say, hey, we want the owners to go for these big names.
You also have to think,
celebrity types. If
they're paying more in players, that's decreasing their revenue, because payroll is an expense, right?
Yeah,
so if a valuation is based on their earnings, and their earnings are being decreased by the amount of payroll that they're paying out, how much more valuable does it make if they end up getting these big players, but they're paying for it? It's going to be hard to value the teams for sure if they decide to go with something like this, if it really does come fold.
Well, yeah, it's going to be strange also, because in the article it says, according to the latest Forbes estimate, the average MLB team is worth $1.78 billion.
Basically, it's a way that somebody can sell a team, because there's not that many people that can pay $1 billion.
And that's,
for a
again,
team.
Yep, they say that in the article. It's a very difficult business to sell when very few people can afford.
When you get something like this involved, regardless of what it is, the cost for the average fan is going to go up, because they're going to try and find another revenue stream to increase the amount of the revenue that can come in.
Right, to basically boost their earnings, to have more valuation, so then that way this fund of funds of teams can be another stream of income for them, because if people are buying this fund of teams, I'm sure the teams are going to get a percentage of that. Right?
Yeah, it could. I mean, well, it's such a new idea, a new concept, that I don't really think we can really be sure what was going to happen, because they're about to try this with the NBA as well. So who knows? Maybe, like I said, maybe you see some smaller minority stakeholders get a say in how the team's managed. Like you said, maybe you see a completely different style of just get celebrity players in here to try to draw more cameras in and more fans in.
True.
I don't know. It'll be cool, though. It's a neat thing to follow. So that's about all for right now that I can think. You guys have any closing thoughts on this? I'm open for. I think it's a great idea.
I think it's another avenue that people can look into, rather than just going directly into the market. I mean, it's just, why not invest in this, in your favorite team? If you're passionate about a certain company, you decide to put money in towards that company, whether public or private. If you're passionate about a sports team, you want to spend money on that team. You buy tickets, buy merchandise, things like that.
Can't you buy shares in the Green Bay Packers?
Somehow you can.
I don't know.
And I don't know that that's really...
I don't follow football that much.
I think that's like a 40-year wait thing right now. However, I will say in the article, it does say the first person who's putting together a limited partnership for this says that the minimum investment is $1 million to join if you want to get in on this. So it's definitely not for the common person yet. So anyhow, that's all we've got for you guys right now. So keep an eye on this. We'll keep an eye on this for you as well, because this is kind of a fun article. But again, none of this is investment advice or recommendations. Do your own research. And if you guys like what you hear here, give us a call.